Well, welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and earlier, our Steve Johnson had a chance to talk to Dr. Frank Turek. Now, this is an interesting interview. He's authored a book called Stealing from God and explains how atheists uses God to make their case. Really? Well, let's join Dr. Turek and Steve Johnson.
Dr. Frank Turek is the author of a book called Stealing from God. He's also written other books like I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Now, I'd like to see that on a movie marquee. That would be a good one right there. As well as he's got a couple web pages. He's the head of the web page called crossexamine.org and impactapologetics.com. So we have a lot of things to talk about. Frank, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Steve, it's a pleasure. Thanks.
You know, I want to ask about your book. Your latest is called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. Interesting premise here that somebody could steal from God. What is your thought that caused this to be the title of your book?
Well, atheists are always trying to argue that there is no God, but when they try and argue there is no God, they're actually stealing aspects of reality that only would exist if God existed. Like, for example, let me give you one of the arguments, Steve, that they say proves there's no God. There's too much evil in the world, right? Well, the problem is when you ask them, what do you mean by evil? They can't really give an answer without appealing to a standard of good. But good only exists if God exists. In other words, evil doesn't disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there, but evil actually points back, it boomerangs back to a God who is the ground of good, because there could be no such thing as evil unless there's good, and there could be no such thing as good unless there is God, the standard of good. So in order to argue against God, atheists have to sit in God's lap to slap his face. Now that's just one of many arguments that atheists give against God that actually backfire, and I point those out in the book.
Okay, I'm glad that you mentioned that because, you know, I've long thought that there has to be some sort of a sense of morality for somebody to have a point of view, whatever that is. And if it's not based in God or a divine being, it's all up to our own enterprise, really. And I've always thought that that's interesting because what is right, what is wrong, why should we even have laws, are all based on a code of morality. And I've just, as a side issue, because I know this moves into a whole other area, I found it fascinating that those who say there is no God have to come forward with some sort of a standard, though, just for humanity to exist, and it ends up coming back to some sort of a moral code. Because otherwise, why don't we just all drive through red lights? Who cares if you hit somebody on the head? You know, it doesn't matter. It's all equal. It's survival of the fittest and all the rest. So I'm glad you mentioned that. But, you know, here's the question I have that kind of goes along with what you asked. Why do you think that atheists feel the need to refute a God even? Because it seems as though there's an agenda there that they have to convince other people. And if they think there is no God, why would they feel they have to convince anybody of anything?
Well, an atheist might say, because you religious fundamentalists are trying to impose your worldview on us, and so we have to convince people that there is no such being out there. Now, the problem is that atheists are trying to impose their worldview on us. In fact, when it comes to a political reality, all laws legislate morality. The only question is whose morality will we legislate? And as you just pointed out, Steve, the atheists are left with no standard by which to judge anything right or wrong. I mean, they can know right or wrong, they can act rightly, but they can't justify a standard out there as to what actually is right. So they wind up stealing that standard from God in order to argue against him. So they are trying. In fact, I see this on college campuses all the time, Steve. I go to a lot of college campuses, and I normally do a presentation called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist based on my previous book. And quite frequently, the elephant in the room is not evidence. The elephant in the room is morality and accountability. Now, what do I mean by that? A lot of times I'll ask atheists, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? And on several occasions, Steve, just over the past few years, I've had atheists yell back at me, no! And I go, wait, you claim to be an atheist, a beacon of reason. Never mind if atheism's true, reason doesn't exist. Because if atheism's true, if we're just molecules in motion, then we're not really reasoning anyway, we're just reacting. But let's leave that aside. I ask you if Christianity were true, would you believe it? And you say no. How's that reasonable? It's not. The issue isn't, I don't have enough evidence that God exists. In many cases, the issue is I don't want there to be a God. I want to do my own thing. I want to go my own way. And many atheists have admitted this. Christopher Hitchens, whom I've debated a couple of times, and you can see these debates on our website for free, crossexamine.org. He says God is a divine dictator. He does not want to live under this divine tyranny. Thomas Nagel, who teaches at New York University as a philosopher, says, it's not just that I don't believe in God. He said, I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be that way. And he said one of the most troubling things to him is that some of the most intelligent people he knows are religious believers. So the issue quite frequently isn't the evidence, Steve. It's morality and accountability. They don't want it to be true.
You know, and that's an interesting thing, because you're right. If somebody says God is a dictator, they are admitting that there is a God by that statement right there. And I'm wondering, do you find that some of the discussions, if I can put them in those terms, but they end up being arguments, end up being on the superficial, there is a God, there isn't a God, there is a God, there isn't a God, as opposed to what you're talking about, more of an agenda policy really behind it, that nobody wants to have a God in their life, according to what you're saying, and everybody wants to rule the world, pretty much.
Well, many people don't. Pascal said people almost invariably arrive at their beliefs not on the basis of proof, but on the basis of what they find attractive. And a lot of people find it attractive, the idea that there is no God. Why? Because then they can be God. Then they can do their own thing. Of course, the sword cuts both ways. A lot of people find Christianity is attractive. And if you tried to ask them, well, how do you know Christianity is true? They couldn't give you any evidence. Now, thankfully, you can believe something is true even if you don't know why it's true. In the case of Christianity, the evidence is behind Christianity. But with regard to atheism, they are the ones out there who are trying to come up with all these different aspects of reality that only exist if God exists. In fact, that's what the book, Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case, is all about. In fact, there's an acronym in there, an acrostic I use, Steve, to try and point out the things that atheists try and say point away from God, but would only exist if God existed. The acronym or the acrostic is CRIMES, C-R-I-M-E-S. And each chapter goes through one of these crimes. The C stands for causality, the R reason, the I information, the M morality, the E evil, and the S stands for science. Those things, causality, reason, information, morality, evil, and science, wouldn't exist unless God existed. Yes, yet atheists are using them to try and say God doesn't exist.
You know, it seems to me that these arguments that we've been discussing seem to be more on the surface now than they ever have been. Is that true, or do you think it's because we have more access to YouTube and videos and all that kind of bring these discussions that people otherwise wouldn't have had into the public forum?
I think that's a good question, Steve. I think the atheists, the new atheists, these are people like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett and a few others. They really arose after 9/11 because up to that point in the West, religion for many of them was just considered to be something you didn't really need to worry about. It was no big deal. But with 9/11, they saw religion, obviously the evil side of certainly Islam, bear its ugly head. And what they've done is they've lumped all religions together, like they're all equivalent to radical Islam, and they paint them all with the same broad brush. So I think part of this it has been a result of 9/11.
You know, you talk about the supposedly rational view that those who have an atheistic tendency tend to have, and a lot of them are academians, and yet there seems to be this illogical step that is taken, like you said, lumping all religions together, which doesn't make any sense at all, because that's about as unreasonable as one could expect. Do you think that that type of thing is being used as an argument, or do they really believe some of the things that are said in that regard?
I don't know if they really believe it. I'd assume they do. It's interesting that Richard Dawkins at the so-called Reason rally in Washington, D.C. 3 years ago resorted to ridicule when he said that we ought to mock believers. Well, if his view is so reasonable, why would he be mocking people? Why wouldn't he just provide evidence and say, look, here's the truth? So it's interesting they resort to ridicule. And Christopher Hitchens was the same way. He resorted to ridicule so much, even in his book, which, by the way, had a lot of truth in it. Religious people have done many evil things, but of course there would be no such thing as evil unless there was good, and there would be no such thing as good unless God existed. But in my debates with Hitchens, I ended both debates this way. I said, Christopher Hitchens' view can be summed up in one sentence. Here it is. There is no God, and I hate him. That's really what you could tell by reading between the lines of his book. So much of it, Steve, is emotional, it's volitional, it's moral, it's not intellectual. A lot of atheists are hurt, they're angry, they think the God that they have in their mind has let them down, and so they think he doesn't exist. And otherwise, I wouldn't see why they'd resort to ridicule and mockery when they could just use so-called reason if they think their view is really reasonable. You know,
I remember one section from Expelled with Ben Stein where he was talking to Richard Dawkins, and he was just asking the question, well, where do you think life began? And Dawkins, you know, you would have thought he had really thought this through because of his arguments, but he said, oh, I don't know, maybe it was some sort of, it was like space dust that created a life form or a life form from another planet.
Yeah, an alien.
An alien. And then he goes, well, where did the alien come from? Well, I don't know. And you could tell he was getting a little perplexed. And I thought, you know, I'm really surprised that such a basic question could really, I guess you'd say, trip up somebody like that who is supposedly one of the spokesmen for atheism. And it surprised me how he hadn't thought that through. And it made me wonder, is there really this intellectual atheistic viewpoint, or is it back to what I think you've hit on? People just don't want to have a God in their life or admit that there is one. Is it? Am I distilling it down to basic? Is that what it is?
Well, I would say many of the new atheists are like you say, but I don't want to be guilty of the same thing I'm saying they're doing. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. The people that I deal with in the book Stealing from God are people like Lawrence Krauss, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens. They're the more prominent atheists that you hear about in the media. Now, that's not to say there aren't some academic atheists that you and I maybe have never heard of that might not have a more restrained and reasonable approach to their viewpoint. But my point is that even if they think that they have the reasonable viewpoint, they are stealing reason itself from God, because reason wouldn't exist in an all-atheistic, materialistic world. You see, if the atheists are right, they believe everything's material. Well, the laws of logic that we are using right now, Steve, to communicate are not made of materials. The law of non-contradiction isn't made of molecules. It's an immaterial reality that we use to communicate and to think. So when atheists try and give reasons against God, they are actually stealing from God in order to argue against him. Now, I'm not saying that just because there are these laws of logic, the God of the Bible is true. But I am saying that atheism is false, because, or at least you couldn't know if atheism were true, because there'd be no way to provide a reasonable argument for atheism if we're all just molecules in motion, because we're not really thinking, we're just reacting. I think the evidence points to the fact that the ground of all reason ultimately winds up to be the God of the Bible with other evidence, but I'm simply saying here that reason does not comport well with the atheistic worldview, because everything is material in the atheistic worldview, and the laws of logic aren't made of materials.
All right, we're talking to Dr. Frank Turek. He's the author of several books. The latest is called Stealing from God and Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. He's also written a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. He also speaks on college campuses. We're going to come back and talk to him in just a couple of minutes about what he's seeing on the campus front, and has that changed over the years. So keep it tuned right here. We'll be back with more on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Dr. Frank Turek, author of a couple books and a couple web pages. A book you might have read is called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. He's also the author of a new book called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. And he's also, you can check him out at two web pages, crossexamined.org and also impactapologetics.com. Dr. Turek, let me ask you, you've debated a lot of academians and so on who are in the field and dealing with atheism and so on. You also talk on college campuses. I think of how, let's talk about in general terms, the college campuses from the 60s to what we're seeing now. You know, it's a place supposedly for open speech and discussion and all of that. What is it that you're seeing on college campuses right now when you go to speak to students? What seems to strike you as interesting, unique, or perhaps different?
Well, I think there's a great spiritual hunger out there, because when we create, or when we come on a college campus and present, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, we get a lot of people showing up. Of course, whenever you call it, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, you get everyone from atheist to Christian showing up. And during the Q&A, there's quite a lot of give and take, so it makes for an interesting evening. So I think there is a hunger out there for it. What I also see, however, is I see a lot of political correctness. I see a lot of speech codes and free speech zones and all this nonsense out there on many college campuses, because quite frequently the people who say they're fighting for tolerance are often the most intolerant people out there. So I've been protested, believe it or not, on college campuses. I wrote another book called Correct, Not Politically Correct, How Same-Sex Marriage Hurts Everyone. I was at the University, Ohio University, a couple of years ago, and they were all picketing me that I was coming to talk about I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. So I invited them all into the session, and they all stood in the back with their signs, and they heard the entire presentation, including the gospel at the end, and then I answered their questions. So I'm open to talk to anybody. I'll tolerate anybody on a college campus. However, there are many people out there that won't tolerate people like me.
So as you think back to what you have read about, maybe experienced years ago, have college campuses changed, or are they becoming less tolerant from what it sounds like you're saying?
I think they're becoming less tolerant. I don't know what it was like in the 60s, and I've been told that if you remember the 60s, you weren't there.
It all depends what campus you were on, I think.
That's right. That's right. Well, I grew up in the I was born in 61, so I was just you know, a grade schooler when the 60s were going on. But I think it's getting less tolerant and more politically correct. In fact, a friend of mine, Mike Adams, who's a columnist at townhall.com, works through the Alliance Defending Freedom, because he gets emails from students who say, well, we've got this speech code now on this campus, and so he'll contact the Alliance for Defending Freedom. They'll fire off a letter to the president and say this is unconstitutional, and usually the university will back down. So the university out there is putting all sorts of unnecessary restraints on speech and unconstitutional restraints on speech, and we need to speak up as Christians, not for just our sake, but for the sake of everybody. You
know, I think the group ACLJ is also seeing a lot of that happening on college campuses as well, and I'm kind of amazed, I mean, from the news that we cover, how the same article could have been written at yet another college campus, where all of a sudden some clamping down of what are personal freedoms that are guaranteed in the Constitution take place at yet another institution. That story's over, and then it happens in another part of the country. I'm kind of amazed. It seems to be an ongoing battle that way. What is it that when you go and you talk to some of these students and you're done with it all, what do you think is the conclusion? I realize it's a little bit of a biased view, but from when you walk away, do you feel you've accomplished something on that campus?
Oh, absolutely. I kind of feel like probably the Apostle Paul felt when he went to Mars Hill. You know, some mock what you do, some believe what you say, and others say, well, I'll hear you again. I mean, that's the same three responses any speaker gets, right? I agree with you, I don't agree with you, I'm going to mock you, or, let me consider this further. So I think that's true wherever we go. I mean, we get emails all the time that people are affected positively by I don't have enough faith to be an atheist seminars. Now, the new book, Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case, this book really deals with the arguments that you hear on college campuses, particularly from atheistic college professors, because, Steve, college professors are 5 times more likely to be atheists than the general public, and more than half of college professors view evangelical students unfavorably. And to a certain extent, I don't blame them for that, because most evangelical students get to college unable to support what they believe. So I can see why many college professors are unimpressed with the inability of evangelical students to articulate why they believe Christianity is true. And as you probably know, Steve, 75% of young people
who are Christians who go off to college, walk away from the church once they go to college. And there's a number of reasons for this, but one of the reasons is intellectually they don't know why it's true, because we've never told them why it's true. So that's what we're trying to do in these books called Stealing from God and I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. We're trying to show people why it's much more reasonable to believe in Christ, and you have to steal from God in order to argue against him if you want to be an atheist.
Okay, now you've hit on something that I wanted to talk about, ask you about, because as you look at those students who are coming into classes, or maybe any kind of just a discussion that Christians might have who have a belief system, they know what they believe, but they have a hard time articulating it, what would you say are the biggest problems that people of faith have in trying to engage somebody in a way that has a benefit to actually discussing the issues of atheism or whatever the biblical concept might be? What would you suggest?
The problem is we try and make statements rather than ask questions. And there are questions you ought to ask when people make a claim. In fact, we have an app on the iPhone or the iPad or the Droid. It's called the Cross-Examined app. People can download it for free, Steve. And we've had almost 50,000 downloads in the past, 16 months or so. On this app, there's a quick answer section. And the quick answer section gives people questions or facts that they can relate back to somebody who makes a statement. So there are 3 questions one ought to ask when somebody says something. The first question is, what do you mean by that? Because quite frequently, like, people will ask me, well, do you believe in evolution? My first question is, what do you mean by evolution? Right? If you mean change over time, I'm with you. We all see that. But if you mean the molecules to man philosophical worldview that says there was no intelligence that intervened in any point in creating life, no, I don't think the evidence shows that. The second question, after you ask what do you mean by that, is how did you come to that conclusion? I ask people all the time. In fact, we have videos of Q&A on college campuses. They're all on our website, crossexamined.org, where people will say, do you believe in evolution? And I'll say, what do you mean by evolution? And they'll tell me that Darwinism, and I'll say, okay, how did you come to that conclusion that Darwinism is true? Do you know, Steve, I've never gotten a good answer, other than all scientists believe this. Nobody comes forth with evidence. And if they do come forth with evidence, it's circular evidence. It's not any evidence that really supports their viewpoint. So always ask, what do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? The third question, and all these questions are in the app, the third question is, have you ever considered, for example, that macroevolution is a philosophical worldview that has very little evidence behind it? In fact, one of the pieces of evidence that it can't deal with is the origin of information. Where did information come from? Every time we see information, we always see it comes from a mind. But you're telling me that natural laws created information, like, say, the information in your genome, which is 3.5 billion letters long? Now, to believe that that resulted by natural forces is like believing that the Library of Congress resulted from an explosion in a printing shop. You know, I don't have enough faith to believe that. So if you just ask those 3 questions, what do you mean by that? How'd you come to that conclusion? And have you ever considered, you can start advancing the ball forward. When somebody says something that you think is false, it's not your job to refute what they say. It's their job to support what they say. And many times they lack the intellectual justification to support it. Why? Because, Steve, they've only heard a slogan. They've heard slogans. They haven't seen the evidence. They're just living on slogans.
That's interesting because, you know, as you say, so many people kind of live that way. I'm wondering if there aren't Christians also who kind of throw out the slogans, but they haven't really thought of their argument as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. No question.
So it is, have you had discussions where you've faced off against somebody who's totally opposed to you, and within your discussion they have changed their mind, or the best that you can hope for is that they will consider what you're talking about?
Well, that may happen over a long period of time, that someone may change their minds. I mean, we get emails all the time that say, I was an atheist, I read the book, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist, and now I'm following Christ. We get that kind of response sometimes, not always, obviously. But in a debate, say, if I'm debating someone like Christopher Hitchens, who has since passed away, as you know, I just debated last year David Silverman, he's the president of American Atheists. Chances are you're not going to convince them of their position, but that's not my goal. My goal is to try and convince maybe people in the audience that the position of Christianity is the most reasonable position. And so
the other person is probably more too vested in his or her worldview to change their mind on the spot. But you might have an opportunity with people in the audience.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're certainly staying focused with who it is you are talking to, but who it is that's hearing what you're saying at the same time. Yeah. Okay, you've got these 2 books out. I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist and Stealing from God. You got something else planned? I imagine the book publishing companies always say, what's your next one?
Well, this one just came out, Stealing from God. So we do all sorts of TV programs each year. We have a TV program on the NRB network on Wednesday nights called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. So we're doing those all the time. This summer, we're coming to churches around the country to do the Cross-Examine College Prep course, Steve. In one day, we're trying to show both students, upcoming students, and their parents what they're going to experience at college and how to be prepared for it, because it's a whole nother world other than high school. It goes well beyond that, and most of what they're going to hear is completely opposite to the Christian faith. So we're doing college prep courses. We are doing radio every week on our radio program, and we're putting up videos all the time at crossexamine.org. So anybody can see what we're doing right there on the website, crossexamine.org. That's cross-examined with a D on the end of it. There it is right behind me.
Okay. So that's a place to find out about a lot of the things that you've been talking about.
Yes,
also,
sir.
you have impactapologetics.com. I won't confuse it with 2. I can remember 1. I think that's
Cross-examined is good. They're linked. It doesn't matter.
Okay, great. All right, crossexamine.org. Dr. Frank Turek, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Steve, a pleasure. Thank you.
Fascinating, to say the least. All right. Hey, coming up next, can you believe it in Oregon that we got a law that could prevent people who have been abused from getting help? We're going to talk about that coming up in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. What a delight for us to have with us today Christopher Doyle. He's a licensed therapist and counselor at Equity and Justice for All. He's concerned about a bill in Oregon that could threaten to deny sexually abused minors in our state the right to receive therapy. But first of all, hi, Bill. Excuse me, Christopher. Nice to see you.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, tell us about Equity and Justice for All, the work you do.
Well, Equality and Justice for All is the only civil rights organization that's out there representing the interests of clients and individuals with unwanted same-sex attractions and individuals who have left the homosexual lifestyle or former homosexuals. And so while there's a lot of support out there for individuals who are openly identifying themselves as gay, there's not a lot of people representing those who'd say, you know what, I feel these feelings, but I don't believe that's who I am. And so we represent their rights. And we're out there trying to defend against these unfair laws that are being proposed by gay activists across the country, trying to take away counseling for those who have been sexually abused and are confused.
Whoa. So those who have the tendencies but don't want to go that way, they need protection?
Absolutely. There's a movement out there that says that anyone who experiences same-sex attractions is gay. But that's actually not true at all. I'm one of those people. When I was 8 years old, I was sexually abused by an older family member for a year. Subsequently, I started feeling same-sex attractions, and when I was 23, I started to heal from that abuse and resolve those issues. And when I did, my same-sex attractions went away. I resolved those issues, and now I'm married. I have 3 kids. I love my wife. We're actually in the process of adopting two more kids from China. Wow. And so there's people out there like myself who they don't identify themselves as gay. And this law, this bill being proposed, which is HB 2307, it's saying that if a minor experiences same-sex attractions, there's no option for them. They must identify as gay, and there is nobody that's allowed to help them actually understand why they might be feeling that way and seek some help. And we're saying that's un-American. How is it that in America we are taking away the freedom of choice and religion from people and saying that you can't get help for this from a highly qualified licensed mental health care? It's simply un-American.
All right, HB 2307. Where is it in the process, do you know?
Well, this bill already passed through the House of Representatives, and it is scheduled to be heard in a Senate committee in just a couple of weeks. And so we have a petition on our website. If you go to equalityandjusticeforall.org, sign the petition and tell them the Senate committee members to vote no for this destructive legislation. You know, if this legislation gets through, you will have minors, families, and children who have been sexually abused, who won't have anywhere to go to heal that abuse and resolve those same-sex attractions that result. They're trying to take it away from the most highly qualified practitioners in Oregon and say that it's illegal to do this work. And we're saying this is completely unfair, it's unjustified, and that Christians out there need to go and tell their legislators that they won't stand for this.
That's unbelievable. My brain's on tilt. Have you or your organization testified in the committee?
We actually have been working at this for 2 years. In 2012 and 2013, California and New Jersey passed these unfair laws based on false testimony all across the state. There was activists saying that they've been electroshocked and tortured, and we actually debunked all of those stories. We actually testified in New Jersey, and there was a transgender person who said that he, who was transitioning into a woman, said it was electroshocked at an Assemblies of God Christian camp. And we actually did the research and found out that this was a complete hoax. It was out of a RuPaul movie made in 1999 called But I'm a Cheerleader. But the legislature in New Jersey listened to these stories and completely rammed this legislation through. And so once we started really working at this issue and really educating legislators across the country, you know, in 2014, 15 legislators across the country said no to this destructive legislation. 15 said no. And already in 2015, several of us said no also. But Oregon is one of the few states that is actually listening to these gay activists and these lies. And we're saying Christians need to stand up, they need to say no to these lies, and that we want qualified mental health practitioners in Oregon who can actually help youth work through these issues. There is more than one angle to this story. I'm
stunned. I'm just stunned. Fast forward this just for a moment, a little bit on the hypothetical side. Let's say it passes. Does it set up those who try to rescue somebody anyway from this could be charged with a crime or something?
Well, the way that the law is written is that it would basically the licensed counselor would be subject to disciplinary action, including losing their license. And so it would essentially tie their hands and say that if you try to help someone as a licensed counselor who doesn't want to experience same-sex attractions and wants to try to resolve those issues, you could actually lose your license. And so what's happening then, the gay activists, their strategy is to basically take the most qualified people out there that could help and tie their hands so that there's no one who can really help youth deal with this issue. And of course, we know that their ultimate goal is to indoctrinate America to believe that everyone is simply born gay and you cannot change. And that's simply not the truth. In 2008, American Psychological Association even said that people aren't simply born gay, that it's a complex variety of factors that happen, and that there's many environmental, there's many familial and temperamental issues that go into it, and that people do actually experience change. There's 100 years of psychological research that actually shows this. But the gay activists have a grip on American society, telling them that this is simply a biological or genetic issue. And that's simply not true. People can and do experience change. I did myself. I've worked with hundreds of clients over the last 5 years. My organization, over the last 25 years, has worked with thousands of people who've experienced change in their sexuality. And we're saying that this can happen and that you're taking away the rights of people who really don't want to experience this, and that's just wrong.
Wow. All right. It's HB 2307, and let me encourage you, now that it's left the House and going to the Senate, you may, for those in Southern Oregon and anywhere else that you're watching in the state of Oregon, whether you're on Roku or on cable or wherever, check out who your state senator is and write them a letter. Here in Southern Oregon, it'd be Senator Alan Bates. I'd give him a call right away and say,
well,
no.
If you go to our website at equalityandjusticeforall.org, we have a petition on our website you can click on, sign the petition, and it emails every single person on that Senate committee that's going to hear this legislation.
All right, that's the simple way to do it. All right, so go to equalityandjusticeforall.org. Is that right, .org?
Yeah, and just .org, and just click on the petition and sign it.
Okay. You know, Christopher, wow, this is mind-boggling. Couple basic questions. Your own experience, are you seeing that if there was some kind of abuse early in age, that is a common in those who have a tendency to be attracted to same-sex arrangement?
Well, there's many factors that lead someone to develop same-sex attractions, and sexual or emotional or even physical abuse certainly can be one of the factors. And I do see those factors very common in the clients that I work with. It's not just sexual abuse; it could be emotional abuse. Sometimes there's a lack of bonding and connection with the same sex, and that clients are sexualizing their needs for emotional connection with the same sex. And so we work with clients. But what's importantly that we say here is that every single person, families, minors, teenagers, have the right to seek out a licensed counselor to work that shares their values. And what the gay activists are trying to do through this legislation is shut down the debate, shut down the right of Christians to go and seek out licensed counselors who can help them work through these issues. It's simply un-American. And so we're saying this is not fair, that Christians should have the right to really look at these issues just as I did and resolve them, okay? And so we really need, Oregon citizens really need to step up and say, and email their legislators and say, we don't want this. And we're not going to vote for you if you pass this legislation through.
Well, the other thing you're saying here is I think the church is really struggling with how to handle the whole gay issue. We know what the scriptures say, and you know what? Even the gay community knows what the scriptures say, but we haven't figured out a way to legitimately reach out to them. And your organization is to me, is a real ray of hope here, because you're showing what can be done if counseling and therapy is properly applied.
Well, I'm also the director of the International Healing Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that's been around for 25 years. And if you go onto our website, which is comingoutlove.com, we have actually a counselor training program that we work with pastors and ministers and therapists from all over the world. And we teach them how to work with someone who's struggling with these issues. What are the common issues that they experience? What are effective therapeutic techniques, both from a lay perspective, from a minister perspective, and also from a psychotherapeutic perspective. And so there certainly are solutions out there. If you go onto our website at comingoutlove.org, you'll find how you can get trained and really work with people who are struggling with this issue. Because you're right, the church really does need help. They don't understand how to work with people on this issue. And they either take two polar opposite extremes. They either say, you chose this and you're going to hell and you're a sinner, or they say, well, you're born this way and that's fine too and everything is great. But actually the truth really lies somewhere in the middle. This is a very complex issue, and people need, especially those in the church, need to understand that there's a lot going on there that they don't understand, and they need to work and to be able to understand and help those who are struggling.
Beautiful. All right, let me take a quick break, Christopher. We'll be right back again. Let me encourage you to go to equalityandjusticeforall.org, sign their petition, and on there you'll see everybody that's on this committee going into the Senate now. We're talking Oregon here, and you can contact those senators as they head into committee with HB 2307. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. Our special guest today is Christopher Doyle. He's a licensed therapist and counselor with Equality and Justice for All, and that is also where you can go, their website, equalityandjusticeforall.org. And he's sharing with us a bill that's now working its way through the Oregon legislature. It's House Bill HB 2307. And I have to tell you, just about the time I thought I heard it all, another shoe drops. I'm just kind of I'm on tilt with this one. But Christopher, for those just joining us, your organization works with those who have had same-sex attractions but realize that, they don't want to go this way, and you help them and you represent them and you counsel them out of that and into a godly lifestyle. But this bill would deny children who have been abused and are confused from therapy. I mean, it's not only un-American, it's almost unhumane. I mean, who is supporting this? It just has to be the radical left community.
Well, you're right. It's unconscionable that gay activists would seek to take away the rights of children who have been sexually abused. And Bill 2307 will do just that. And we know that if counseling is not available for these children who are struggling with same-sex attractions as a result of abuse, many of them will simply conclude, I must be born this way, and they won't get help. And we know that young people are very impressionable. I mean, the media is reaching them at younger and younger ages. And by the time someone's 12 or 13 years old, if they're experiencing same-sex attractions, they've been indoctrinated by the left thinking that I must be gay. And so if we can't have counselors out there who present an alternative message to them that says, well, you know what? Maybe there is a reason why you feel this way. Maybe you weren't born this way. Let's explore that. That's exactly what this bill is saying we can't do. We can't explore with someone why they might be feeling this way. We can't help them resist any behaviors or unwanted attractions, even if that's against their faith. We're basically telling Christians that your First Amendment rights don't matter here, that you only have one choice, and that is to embrace a gay identity. And that's unchristian, that's ungodly, it's unconscionable, and you're right, it is inhumane to give a young person and say there's no hope for you, you can't get counseling. That is about the worst sort of abuse that someone could do. And we're saying that Oregons need to stand up to this terrible, terrible, destructive legislation. If you want your children to get good help, you need to contact your legislators and say, no, we're not voting for you if you vote this legislation through. This is unconscionable. You can sign that petition at equalityandjusticeforall.org.
All right, do that. Go there and sign the petition. You'll also find there members of the committee where this HB 2307 will be heading to. All right, Christopher, where is the medical community? Where is the psychological community? How can they stand by and let this happen? That's against everything they stand for.
Well, you're right. It should be against everything they stand for, because the right of self-determination is actually a bedrock principle that the medical community and psychological community has stood behind for centuries, okay? But the problem is that the gay activists have infiltrated every single one of these mainstream organizations and indoctrinated to think that people are simply born gay and cannot change. And that is simply not the truth. There has never been any evidence from a biological, a genetic, or a hormonal perspective that says people are born this way, and that there are people, there's thousands of people like myself who once experienced same-sex attractions, who went and got counseling, who've come out of that, who've experienced change. I mean, everyone knows, even the left organizations will admit that sexuality is fluid. And so, but what's happening here is that there's such a political agenda to shut down free speech and close the debate on this issue that now you're seeing legislatures are being literally duped by the gay activists in the name of politics. In order to get their agenda through, they're now shutting down the rights of sexually abused kids, and that's the latest pawn in their political strategy.
Well, unfortunately, the atmosphere in Oregon couldn't be worse. I mean, you've got a democratically controlled House, Senate, and now a very strong gay activist governor. I mean, unless you have some legislators really stand up and take a bold step, this could be a done deal.
Well, what we need people to do who are listening to this is as soon as this program is over, get off your couch, get on your computer, sign the petition, call your legislator. If enough people reach out to their legislators and say, I am not voting for you if you're not going to stand up for the rights of sexually abused kids. This will get through. If enough people, if thousands of people email their legislators and say something, this will be stopped. And we need people to really take action.
All right. And let me encourage folks, Holly, there's so many things, but this one is just, it's got my brain on tilt. Equality and Justice for All.org. That's all one word. Equality and Justice for All.org. Sign that petition. Also, familiarize with the contact of the committee members there in the Senate and give them a call. Be nice and polite, but also be very firm and clear that you want them to vote no on 2307, and tell them why. That any sexually abused child should have access to therapy, no matter what the case is. This is just crazy. I want to come back to the work you do just for a moment, Christopher, because I think you also represent an incredible ray of hope here, and you've been at it for a long time. Is there a basic time frame, or how does the process go when somebody realizes this is wrong, I don't really want to go there, and yet I don't know what to do? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Well, the basic thing that we do with our clients as a psychotherapist, I'm a licensed counselor with the International Healing Foundation. And number one, we help clients identify the root causes of why they experience same-sex attractions. Number two, we basically help them resolve those issues in a therapeutic relationship over time. And then number three, so many of our clients, they're sexualizing their relationships with the same sex. And so we help them receive those relationships, love in those relationships from a non-sexual way, forming healthy friendships, forming healthy people in their life, same-sex friends who can encourage them, who can provide friendship and support for them in their journey. So we do those basic steps, and when clients do that, they experience change.
Long process, huh? It takes a lot of work.
It takes a lot of work, but for those who are really willing to look at the issues and not just accept the lie that they're born that way, they can actually experience change and healing from same-sex attraction. I'm one of them. Thousands of other people have done it as well. And if they want more information on that, they can also get more information at our website at comingoutloved.com, and we can help people. And also parents. We work with a lot of parents who are struggling with this issue, both with gay-identified children and those who want to change. And just because their child is gay doesn't mean that there's nothing the family can do. We really promote open dialogue, communication, and healthy healing in families who are struggling with this issue. And there's more to the story than what people hear. So if you go out and get information on our website at comingoutloved.com, you'll find some solutions on how to really deal with this issue that you're struggling with in your family.
In your own case, was the change instant? I mean,
no, of course not. Change is never instant.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, but where does your faith come into all this?
Well, I'm a strong Christian. I grew up in an evangelical Christian home. And the one thing that my parents didn't know how to do was they didn't know how to help me process my feelings and emotions. Both of my parents came from alcoholic and abusive backgrounds. And so, unfortunately, I walked in those steps, too, of becoming abused when I was a child. And it wasn't until I really sought out really good counseling and healthy men, Christian men in my church, who really helped me to start understanding my feelings and my emotions and really processing those. And a lot of what we do is helping clients understand that it's not simply a sexual issue. There's a lot of emotional issues going on here. Clients who have same-sex attractions are oftentimes sexualizing their need for emotional connection. And we help clients understand what it is that they really want, and it's not necessarily sex.
Well, you're another example of what I say so often on this show. Whatever God saves you from or brings you through, turns you around, makes you a minister too. And that's what you're doing. And I want to say to our viewers and listeners, first of all, number one, go to equalityandjusticeforall.org and sign that petition to say no on House Bill 2307. This is in the state of Oregon, folks, and your legislature is in session right now. And this is going to the Senate committee, and you'll also see the various members of that committee where you can send them an email. And if you need more information on same-sex attractions and all the things that Christopher's involved in, comingoutloved.com is that website. Christopher, you're a delight and inspiration. I want to have you back. I think we can learn a lot from you.
Thank you very much. It'd be my pleasure anytime.
Where are you headquartered?
We're located in the Washington, D.C. area.
Okay, good. Thanks, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. God bless. And we'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.